The competition in the PC handheld space has been really spinning up. There's been so many PC handhelds that have come out, but something that all of these handhelds have in common is that they all share a similar processor from AMD, whether that's a custom solution like the Steam Deck has, or something a little bit more off the shelf, like a processor you might find in a laptop like the 8840U, or a slightly modified or customized version like the Z chipsets we've seen from the Z1s, Z2 Go's out there. Essentially, if you're playing on a PC handheld, it's most likely running an AMD processor, which have been the gold standard for quite a while. They've been the primary processor found in the vast majority of some of the most popular handhelds over the last several years. And that's primarily because of AMD's amazing integrated graphics. AMD has gone through extensive R&D, extensive research, and all sorts of development and putting into making amazing integrated graphics. Because, at least up until recently, AMD was one of the few companies that made both dedicated graphics cards and CPUs. They're able to take their decades of technical prowess developed in making dedicated graphics cards, in condensing it, in attaching it to their CPUs, making an APU, utilizing the same architecture found inside their dedicated graphics, utilizing the same core technologies. And all that work that gone into developing the drivers for those dedicated graphics cards are easily transferable to their new APUs, which is something the vast majority of people really don't think about, how there's been decades of driver development, things that we really don't think about that newer graphics cards would have to actually spend a very long time developing solutions for. Things like DirectX 9 support, DirectX 10 support for legacy and older titles that either don't see regular development anymore or just simply are made by companies that don't exist. That puts a lot of pressure on a driver team to make sure pretty much every game can run well. And that's what makes this most recent bit of news/rumor about MSI switching their quite infamous MSI Claw device to AMD. They have been one of the only mainstream companies who have a PC handheld to be using Intel. And I honestly am quite disappointed to hear this potential switch, because while I had my issues with the original Claw, the MSI Claw 2 essentially runs fairly well, and with Intel's new Arc dedicated graphics solutions out there now, their driver development has increased rapidly. Every driver update for a while, it seemed like that there was massive performance increases, especially in those older legacy titles. Because when you think about it, AMD and Nvidia had years. They were developing these drivers at the same time these games were coming out, but Intel is actually for the very first time having to consider some of those things, for the very first time having to make sure their drivers work with DirectX 9 and DirectX 8 level games. So it makes a fair bit of sense that they wouldn't be perfect right out the gate. But I feel like at this point we've reached a level where, yes, there might be some jankiness and there will always be edge cases. Even with AMD, there are some instances where you have a driver panic or a crash or might happen. And in my personal experience running AMD graphics, it is something that can happen, but it also happens on Nvidia cards. It's not a unique issue. And hearing the potential of MSI switching to AMD makes me kind of disappointed. Intel was just getting their bearing. They were seriously on the edge of making something truly fantastic. The new Claw, while having minor issues, is still really good. It sometimes even beats out the RG Ally X. There is an immense amount of potential here, and if MSI Claw does commit to the Switch, honestly, it'd be a little disappointing. Intel has been just barreling ahead on this new Arc graphics division, and every generation it's been getting better and better. Their newest line of graphics cards have been flying off the shelves because it's an amazing budget card. For about $230, you get amazing performance. Also, the names are just incredibly cool. Celestial, Battle Mage, it's just so cool. Compare that to AMD's RDNA 3.5, and it just feels boring. But if MSI does commit to the Switch, I feel like waters down the overall market. Everything will functionally perform at least somewhat similarly, and there's not real choice in the matter outside of what the device you want to look like and what kind of screen you want it to have. Whether that's OLED or IPS, they're all functionally basically the same, running at about 1080p at about 120 FPS. Leaving the only deciding factor is what kind of screen technology, OLED or IPS. But if there were more options when it comes to CPU, it would make a more competitive, a more interesting PC handheld market. When everybody just uses the same processor, I guess it's just slightly different implementations. This one runs a little bit more cooler. This one has a slightly higher power output. It's just not as interesting. And on some level, I feel like the Claw has pushed development forward, gave Intel a reason to make a mad dash to the finish line trying to get their drivers all sorted out. And it's become this thing where a lot of people in the tech industry, including myself, put out a video discussing how terrible the drivers were and how just bad the first Claw was. And I think that sort of poisoned the well. Seeing that, it probably convinced a lot of people not to get it, but I was only negative because you were paying close to $700, $800 for this device, and it wasn't very functional. And with time and development, they fixed a vast majority of the issues that I had with it. And it actually even dropped in price, becoming actually a pretty decent value. The old Claw was actually a pretty good device to pick up later down the line. Now that we have this new Claw, though, being closer to that $800 price point like the Ally X, it is less of a good value, but if your games you play specifically work better on the Claw, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't pick it up. I say this all because it is genuinely disappointing to see them make the switch. I would love to see more developers and manufacturers get behind these Intel processors. Truly though, the biggest problem with using Intel processors at this point isn't necessarily the performance you get out of them, it's mostly the efficiency. If I remember correctly, in the standard performance mode or the standard low watt mode, you get 17 watts as the lowest you could go. I could be wrong, but 17 watts sounds right. And that was simply not low enough. In that original Claw, it drastically had significantly worse battery life compared to a lot of other PC handhelds. And that low wattage efficiency is what matters most on PC handhelds. Something like the Steam Deck can go as low as 1 or 2 watts. Yes, there's not very many games you can play like that, but I play a lot of games at 5 watts, especially if I'm playing something like Stardew Valley. I drop it to 5 watts and I'm able to get like 4 or 5 hours of gameplay out of that. Bear in mind, I could be wrong, I never timed it, but it never died on me by the time I was done playing. But honestly, it does make sense why they would make that switch. The efficiency gains you get when switching to AMD drastically improves things like battery life, low watt performance when gaming. Overall, it does make the most sense for specifically a PC handheld. And I just hope Intel is able to really get a control and just go to town on making the most efficient processors that they can, because at this point, it isn't a race to see how many FPS your processor can get, it's how long can you make your processor last. I would love to hear what you guys think about this. Do you wish that MSI would make the switch over to an AMD processor, or do you wish that they would stick to Intel? I would love to hear what you guys think about this down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media coverage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.